How to start a project. My name is Guilherme and I'm a project management expert. I help professionals to become successful project managers. How do I do that in practice? Well, it can be in several different ways, from providing training to help the or to help people to develop their project management knowledge and help the project management skill. Can be via mentoring programs and helping a specific person to prepare to develop their skills in your career, to help them to gain confidence, to help them to prepare for a meeting, to help them to organize their project, or even to help them to prepare for an interview in project management, or even via consulting to a different types of company. Before I start the content today here, make sure you like and share this video so it can reach more people and more people can learn project management. So the topic that I select today is how to start a project. This is also was a question that I got during a training yesterday, and I thought that it's very important, of course, to explain why and how to start a project. Why is it important to have a milestone to start a project, and how you should do it, or how you can do that in practice. First of all, why it's important to have a milestone to start a project. Usually, what you want to have to start a project, you want to have a specific milestone to have a clean cut when a project is start. That will help a company to assign budget, to assign a project manager, and to give authority to the project manager to start. And I'm going to show you what a kind of template that you can use to start a project, what are important information. But before doing that, I also want to explain why this approval also needs to be aligned with the portfolio view of a company. You can imagine that if you go in any type of company there around the world and you ask people about ideas of maybe projects or improvements or what to do, you're going to have plenty of different ideas. Can be ideas for a product, can be ideas for service improvement, can be ideas for services, or can be ideas for changes or anything like that. What happened is from a lot of different possibilities that the company have constrained resource, meaning the company that has a limited amount of people, a limited amount of money, and the company cannot do anything, everything at the same time. That's why it's important to have a portfolio initiative that will provide a view and help to select a project to be executed. Like this image that you see here, that's the idea of having this portfolio management. Why? Because the portfolio management should select projects that are relevant for the company strategy and objectives that helps the company to achieve its mission and its vision. A very simple example that I had in the past with a company that I worked on. This is more than 10 years ago. And so the company at some point established a target, so an objective, that the company would like to have an operating margin target average for the entire company for all the projects of 10% in that year or in the following years. Well, what happened is after that, I think, or around the same time, the company they sold a new project or they were awarded for a new project with a specific customer, and I was assigned as a project manager. That ends up that the business case of the project had an operating margin. I think I don't remember the exactly numbers, but I believe it was about 5%. And of course, one of the directors of the company told me now the operating margin from your project should be 10%. Well, this is a very big problem because when you start the project, they study the project, they make all the assumptions based on the cost, based on the price that the customer could accept it, and they end up with a business case of 5%. So this project was completely misaligned with the company objective there. And although it can be nice, okay, you can improve there, and that's a target for improvement. Although it was not how it was set and defined for me, it's not so easy to move from like 5% operating margin to 10%. Basically, you're doubling your result. And it's some projects they can never do that, or some projects for several other chances that they might not be able to achieve that. Of course, it maybe you can reach an improvement, but maybe the improvement you land, I don't know, 6%, 7%, 8% instead of the 10% as a limit that the company wants. But as well be that because of the risks of the project would end up with less than 5%, maybe 4, 3%, or even the company would have a negative margin there. What's the problem when you approve a project like that? And because if you don't have a good portfolio initiative, to select the right project, might be that the company is going to sell. In this case, the company was selling a lot of projects with margins below its objective. So when you average up, you're never going to reach your objective there. So you are selecting the wrong projects to be executed, or the projects that you're executing, they do not help you to reach your objective there. On the other hand, every time you add a project that's below your objective, in this case 10%, I do not remember if this was exactly number, but it was around that, I don't know, 9 or 10% or whatever the number is, it's more than 10 years ago. So every time a company select a project that does not help to achieve their objectives, they're getting far away from achieving their objectives. So they are using resource to do something. They are taking risks because all projects they involve risks that I mentioned that might as well be that you don't get the 5% that it's in your initial business case. Might as well be that you end up losing money with that. So the company is using resource, time, risk, making commitments with a customer that for something that might not even help to achieve the company objective there, to achieve the company strategy there. So having this portfolio initiative there is quite important. But what does it have to do with starting a project there? Well, as I already mentioned, the company can have a lot of projects, and to have a formal approval to start a project, ideally what you want this to go for a portfolio management initiative, because then you can create a document called a project charter, which I'm going to show you here a template, or it can be any type of document that a company can have. I'm going to get there on that. And the portfolio management initiative will select what makes more sense to the organization strategy, to the organization objectives, and approve those things. And make sure so the company is investing resource, is investing money, is investing time on things that can help the organization to achieve its objectives, not on random stuff just because it seems nice. And as I already mentioned this example, you're going to see quite a lot of companies that they don't do that. What's the other problem if you start a project without having a clear milestone there, a clear approval there? Well, if someone has an idea and you get people together there, maybe 2 or 3 people working on that, the cost can go up very fast. Meaning that depending on the amount of people are working there, depending of course on the hourly rate from the company, easier you're going to see 10, 20K, 20 when I mean 20K, if you haven't heard on that, it's $20,000, euros or whatever currency there. Then the company starts to spend money in something that does not have even an approved budget. Then might as well be that there's people working, they work for a couple of months, and suddenly there's a cost there, and people ask, okay, why we're spending this money here? Who approved that one? And that's why you don't want to do that. If you do not have this initial milestone there, also how you are going to assign resource, how you are going to give power to the project manager to execute the project. That's a very important thing because if someone has an idea, want to do something, it's something very informal. If this is approved by a sponsor or by a board of directors, that gives the project manager the authority to execute a project, to go in the other areas. Hey, this is approved by our directors here, so that's something that we need to do. This is the direction that we have. This is a project that helps the company to achieve its objectives. So it's very important to have this milestone. And of course, it's very important that this also is connected with a portfolio management initiative there. So in practice, how you start a project? If I look on the PM Box 6th edition. And again, if you do not know that, the 6th edition, everything that's have there is still valid. So you have the 10 knowledge areas there. You have the 49 processes there. But you have a process group that's called initiation. So you have a process group that's called initiation. And under initiation process group is where you basically start a project. And ideally, You have this is under the integration area. The integration area it's not anything specifically. It's just a glue that to remind you that all the project constraints, time, cost, quality, scope, customer satisfaction, resources, risk, all those things are interconnected. That's why it makes sense that that's why the PMI they create something called integration, and that's why it makes sense that the project is started in the integration area. Because to start a project, it can be in very different ways. I've worked in a company, for example, that we started so the company had a commercial department there. This commercial department was in contact with a lot of different customers, and they're creating quotes based on that, so they would specify the scope of the project, uh, quality targets that we had. They would create a business case, and they would create a price, and they would send for a customer. If the customer approved it and awarded the business for the company, and a contract was signed for execution of the project, and then that was the official milestone when a project is started. So, what is this official milestone? I would get a business case, a contract signed with a lot of specification what needs to be done there with a clear scope. Hopefully, not not all the times are like that, but that's what you want to do. In other companies, what our companies have worked on, how the project started. The company has a portfolio management initiative there, so they select the priorities that you want to do it. In this case, you look for a product, you look for products that you see in the market, you look for products that you don't have, but you look for demand or a customer need to create a product that, and based on the strategy that the company has and its objectives, it select a product that helps hopefully the company to achieve these objectives and this strategy. Then there was like a formal gate in this case where the opportunity is described, the type of product is described, initial idea of the business case, and that goes for a review. In this case, for a group of directors that they review and say yes, I approve it. Then the project officially starts. What PMBOK suggests? PMBOK suggests what's called a project charter. What's a project charter? Basically, is the it's a document that formally authorizes the start of the project, which usually includes goal of the project requirement, high level cost, high level milestones, and so on. Now, why this is a project charter? Because that's a nice way to suggest something to start. Again, all the companies, this can be in a different way. Not all companies will have a project charter. To be fair, in all the companies I've worked on, none of them they were using a project charter and calling it a project charter. All of them they had their own way to start a project, but all of them kind of have this clear milestone how you start a project, which is a good thing. Not necessarily because it's in the PMBOK you need to follow it. What's important, of course, you have the information there in whatever type of document or whatever type of procedure the company wants to call it as long as that matches the goal of what you're doing, that's what's the important part. So what's the goal? What you want? You want to make sure that the project is selected, make sure that the project is aligned with the company's strategy and with the company goals. The project is officially approved by a sponsor there, meaning that you have going to have a budget, meaning that the project manager will have the authorization or the authority to go to the areas to ask for research, to go for the execution, and make sure that also it's clear a goal for executing a project like that. So let me show to you one possible template you can use to start a project there. And why, and again, I'm going to repeat some of those items that I already mentioned. So here you see in the screen, that's a project charter. That's a very general template. If you Google, probably you are going to find a lot of different templates. But what you want to have in a project charter, you want to have a background, why the project is being taken there, what's the opportunity mean. Oh, I see that the customer they have these specific needs, and we could potentially fulfill that with this type of product, or a range of customers there that have this need, and that's a way that you can do that. So why this is again it's important that you have a very clear understanding on the background or why the company is doing that. What's the opportunity that's in place? Why? Because with this background, you're going to help to have an objective there. And what you want to have an objective there, you want to have an objective that's clear, that's specific, that's measurable, uh, and that's time bounding to make sure that the project team they have a clear direction in how to go. Because one of the top five reasons why project failure, even according with the research from the Project Management Institute, is there's no clear objectives for the project. So what you want to avoid that. That's also one of the reasons why it's good to have a project charter, or one reason why it's good that you are going to have an official event, maybe a milestone, maybe you can call it a gate, where the project is going to start. This initiation of the project always need to have a very clear objective. Why? Because that will be the north, the guide for the entire project execution there. What else you want to have in a WBS? You want to have, I already mentioned the background, the objective. You want to have a scope. Why a scope? You at this stage when you are starting a project, it might be that you don't have clarity in the full scope that needs to be done there. Meaning, even the company that I worked on, the contract was signed. We had a lot of specification, but as a project manager that was just assigned for that, you are not fully aware of all the details of the specification. What you need to have when you are starting a project, you need to have at least a high level of understanding of the scope of the project, what's expected, what kind of deliverables, that's what you have. Why high level? Because if you are following a waterfall approach, it's already understood that you're starting a project, but then you're going to move to the planning, and then in the planning, uh, when you are doing the planning of the project, is when you are going to investigate all the details of the scope, when you are going to understand the details of the scope there. So, but this high level scope always need to be there. Why? Because I already mentioned that's a guide for the team to execute it. But can you imagine how you are going to select a project if you go for the portfolio management initiative there? How you are going to select a project to make sure that this match the company's strategies and objectives. If you do not have a clear background while the project is being executed, if you don't have an objective, and if you don't know what's exactly the scope for what you're going to do it, so it's impossible for a portfolio initiative to see if this matches or not. So that's why this is so important. What do you need to add there next? Well, you need to make sure that you have key stakeholders. And if you look for making the connection with the PMBOK, their sixth edition, in the initiation process group, there's only two processes. The first one is create the project chart, and the second one that's identify stakeholders. At least it starts to identify stakeholders. And why this is important? Well, because the key stakeholders, they are the ones that will help you to understand the background, the objective, and the scope. They are the ones that are going to set requirements there. So if you don't have a clear, if you don't understand who is the customer or what are the marketing needs, what's your target market, what's your target audience there, you are going to have trouble to execute the project and to come up with scope and requirements from what you're doing there. So this is quite important. And of course, the sponsor. Who is the sponsor? Who approves the project? Who has the power to assign a project manager? Who has the power to to create a budget for the project there? So this is quite important. So the sponsor is the person who's going to do that. It's not, of course, at this stage you're starting a project, you need to assign a project manager there. If you already have team members, what are who can be the team members? Well, depending on the type of project, you're going to have different team members. It can be a designer, it can be a process engineer, a test engineer, a product engineer, a quality engineer, or it can be, I don't know, a site manager or whoever you're going to need to execute a project, but whoever is important that's already present, it's already defined when you are going to start it. This uh, it can be that with the project approval you are heading for a concept phase, a concept phase, or you're already moving to a more execution phase, depending on the type of project, depending on the type of milestone here. But who is important to help in this planning that you're doing for the project there, in this concept that you're doing for the project? So you identify here. It's important that you have an idea of important milestones. For example, the customer tells you, I need samples for this product in November of this year. So that's a hard milestone. Why? Because I'm going to put these samples, I'm going to put in my product to test my product there. And you might get other projects say, I need to start mass production in, I don't know, in 2025 or 2026. Why? Because that's an important milestone that you need to take into consideration in your planning. What are those milestones? They are guide and they are help you to understand the constraints of the project. Does not mean that you are going to make a plan to fit the milestones. You create a plan, you put the milestones there, and of course, you discuss and you align with your team how you can meet those things. But you can also understand that some milestones cannot be achieved. So it's very important that those milestones are here to guide you in the process, but you as a project manager and your team during the planning phase, you need to see what's feasible or not. So this is a constraint that needs to be understood if it's feasible to achieve. Budget, again, this is a very high level budget. Why? Because if you do not have full clarity on your scope, if you do not have full clarity on your timeline, you are not going to be able to come up with a budget. Very simple and very straightforward. So what do you want here? Well, you want to have an idea on a range about a ballpark number of a budget that this project is going to need. That the project sponsor says, okay, up to that value it makes sense. I do approve it. Because you don't want to say, if you add something, I want $10 million like that, the project sponsor likely he's not going to approve like that. So but it's important that you end up in a ballpark number. Sometimes together with the budget, you get also a business case. What's the expectation that you have here? Expected sales, expected margins, and again, all those things are high level initial versions because you're just starting a project. But this is of course to make sure that first this matches the strategic objectives of the company there, and to give an idea when you compare different projects, which one looks like the best one for the company to start an investigation there. Again, it can be a concept phase, you can go for a planning, or you go for an execution, but to give an idea what this project is about. And of course, you can add other constraints that you have already mentioned here. Of course, some constraints, milestones, budget, but can be other type of technical constraints that you have, can be other type of capacity constraints, can be other customer constraints that you have. Some assumptions that you have, because if you are creating a high level budget, if you're creating a high level scope, very likely you are taking assumptions. So it's important that you specify what are the assumptions. Why? Because depending on the assumptions that you are taking, those are also associated with risks. Another risk or dependency that the project have. Maybe you have a dependency with another project. For example, let me say this project here is to create a new assembly line, to put a new assembly line in a factory. But to put this new assembly line to be in place, the company is building a new area there, or a new building for that. So a dependency to make sure that you can install the assembly line, it's making sure that the building is available, the building is ready. And so there's a dependency with this project and with the other one. And based on this document, and of course that you get the approvals there. And in this, because it's just a template, of course you suggest signatures here. In a lot of companies, this will go for very different ways. The approval can go via system to have this formalized. The approval does not to be need to be exactly like a signature. Can be a kickoff meeting, or other. It can be an email approval or so on. That depends a lot on the type of company that you are working on. What's important here is making sure that again you have a clear cut to start the project, where the project manager gets the authority, the project management gets initial resource to start the project as the project team. The project management has, project manager has an initial idea. Well, okay, what's the objective of, what's the background of the project? What's its objective? What's its high level scope, high level milestones, high level budget? Because with that, the project management, the project team, they are going to start to study for the next project phases. And to confirm again, the project phase that you go next can be very different from different types of project that you have. I've already mentioned a few times it can be a concept phase, or it can be already you are moving to a planning phase, or to a planning phase if the company wants to call as a planning phase, or it can be called as a specification phase, or it can be called a detailment phase, or whatever name that you have. There are different industries, different companies will call it in a different ways. But then you have a clean cut when the project starts. That helps you to understand. And also you make sure that you have assigned budget, assigned resources, and so on. To avoid that you end up in all kinds of issues, but also ideally before the approval of the project, again, this go for a portfolio management initiative that's going to oversee this project aligns with our strategy and with our objectives, yes or no? Yes. Among all the projects that we have here, because that might be that you have 10 different projects to execute, but of course you are limited on resource, time, money, and so on. So we are going to say, among those 10 projects I have, which one can bring the best value for the company? But it's not possible to select the best value for the company if you don't have those basic items already drafted out about a project. That's why it's interesting to have a project charter or whatever document your company wants to use, and then you can start and move forward. And if the project is selected, then it's formally approved. Then you move for the next steps in a project. So it's very important. And what would be the, if you look for the PMBOK again, well, then you go for the planning process group, and then of course you enter more a planning phase or concept phase or whatever it's going to be done there. But it's again very important to have this formally approved in the beginning to avoid that you get to a discussion why you are doing that. Who authorized you to spend all this money in this project? This project does not align what we are doing, to avoid that you are wasting time and a lot of other stuff. So what I hope that you understand by now. First, why it's in project, why it's important to have a project start, to make sure that you have this clean cut date there. Why it's important to have a project charter or any other type of document that your company use with important information of a project. Why it's important that this document is reviewed in a portfolio initiative there to make sure that the project is being executed in the right way, and why it's important to have a formal approval there. That's how you should start a project. And again, different companies will have different details of doing that. It can be a signature, it can be a system where you approve it. You can be have a meeting where you have those approvals done. So all the details it can vary a lot from industry and from company to company. What's important is that you understand the concept, what you are doing, and that you have this foundation. So when you see in practice, you are going to see a lot of variations in practice, but you understand why it's being done, why this is important, and how you as a project manager, what you as a project manager can do to help to add more value for the organization there. And I hope that's clear for you. If you have questions, feel free to ask. You can ask here in the comments of this video, or you can go for my Instagram where the Q&A box is always open. Don't forget to follow me, to like and share this video here to make sure that this is delivered for more people. More people can understand why it's so important to have an event to start a project and how you can do that in practice. Also, make sure that you follow me for more content. Every week there's more content on my YouTube channel. Every day there's more content on my Instagram channel. On my Instagram, also I already mentioned there's a Q&A box where you can have questions. And make sure that if you have challenges there, you reach out, because if your goal is to develop your project management skills, my goal is to support you in this journey. Thank you and see you soon. Bye.